Between green hills and gentle streams, the land felt quietly still. Morning mist hugged the grass until the sun cleared it. In this valley, Lena lived. She wasn't defined by family power, but by the rhythm of her daily life. She cleared stones from the path and carried water for the old woodcutter. Her every move was calm and steady, as she walked the village with quiet grace. She offered help with heavy loads and listened when others needed. Her presence was steady. She didn't seek attention, yet her influence shaped the village. The brooks kept flowing. The hills stayed calm as Lena walked. Yet outside her small home, the air began to change. The doorway marked two worlds. Inside, the air was heavy, shut away from sunlight. The floor creaked. Damp wood filled the air. Greta moved with sharp, efficient steps. Her hands stayed busy, her eyes sharp for unfinished chores. She spoke not softly, but with commands that cut the silence. Mara leaned in the doorway, her gaze restless with judgment. She never helped, only leaned in the frame, blocking the world outside. When Lena entered, the room grew cold. Greta paused, jaw tight, turning to her daughter. Mara followed, a faint line at her mouth. There was no warmth, no laughter, only the weight of labor. Every move Lena made was watched. Every breath was weighed against the house's demands. Outside, the hills meant freedom. Inside, the walls closed in. Morning air was thick with damp earth, clinging to the house walls. "Lena, the jars are empty again," she barked. The demand was clear, failure expected. Silence followed, broken only by wind rattling loose panes. She crossed the doorway, leaving the stale air behind. Outside, the world had changed. The morning sun lit the hills in gold. Dew sparks scattered across the grass. The air was crisp, scented with clover and pine, a sharp break from the kitchen's damp earth. She walked on, the land opening vast and quiet. At the forest's edge, the trees rose thick and tall. The path lay still. The forest held its breath, waiting for silence to break. The path ended at a stream. Water pulsed gently, carving through stones and mossy roots. Lena stepped onto the damp bank, set the jars down, and knelt in the cool soil. She hovered her hand above the stream, then plunged it in. The water bit sharp against the sun's warmth. She paused to listen. The brook bubbled over rocks, vanishing into fern shadow. The sound did not come from the wind or the water. It was a thin, brittle vibration that seemed to rise from the very roots of the trees.
"Child, may I have some water? I have traveled so very far."
"You look exhausted," she said, her voice low and steady. She brought the water and offered it to the lady. The old woman lifted the jar, drinking slowly. Sunlight caught the water as it tilted.
"You gave without question and with such genuine kindness."
As her words faded, light fractured in the clearing. A soft shimmer rippled through the air. Light moved, like sunlight on a pond's surface, swirling around Lena in a golden veil. Lena blinked, the golden shimmer still at her sight's edge. When she looked again, the woman was gone. Where she had stood, only mist swirled low, clinging to the damp moss. The forest had returned to its usual state, the birds beginning their songs again in the canopy above. She turned slowly, searching for trail or shadow, but the trees stood silent, indifferent. She picked up the empty water jars, and she began to walk. She kept her eyes on the ground, watching the way the light shifted through the leaves, her mind replaying the woman's voice. Her throat tightened with a dry tickle. She halted on the path, coughing, bent to breathe. The tickle sharpened, pressure rising in her chest. She tried to swallow, but something solid brushed her tongue. Lena gasped, her eyes widening in confusion. She reached up, her fingers trembling as she felt a hard, cold object resting on her lower lip. She pulled it away, a brilliant, polished gem, catching the morning light with a fierce, prismatic glow. It was heavy, cool to the touch, and utterly impossible. The first gem was light, but more followed. Lena fought to steady her breath as her throat pulsed, unstoppable. Pearls and shimmering stones streamed from her mouth like spring water. She gasped, hands shaking, Fingers splayed, but the magic ignored her panic. Light marked the ground as her chest heaved, heart pounding. She knew she could not stop the flow. The forest floor was becoming a bed of impossible wealth. Lena stumbled toward the weathered house, her pace uneven and heavy. Every step felt like a gamble. She kept her chin tucked, trying to swallow the persistent, rhythmic pressure in her throat, but the magic was relentless. Finally, she stepped inside the home. Greta stood by the hearth, Mara against the wall. Their talk fell silent as the door creaked. They looked up, expecting water jars, but saw Lena in the doorway, chest heaving, face pale. She tried to speak, but stones spilled from her lips, ringing sharp against the floorboards. Silence stretched thin in the room. Both stood shocked, her gaze fixed on the shimmering pile across the floorboards. She knelt, joints popping in the quiet, reaching out a hand. The gem caught the firelight, casting a predatory glow on her face. She rolled it between thumb and forefinger. She tested its weight, its cold reality. A thin smile spread across her lips, empty of warmth. The air grew heavy with sharp intent. Greta stood and closed the door. She turned to Lena, yanking her arm close. "Where did you get these? Speak!" Greta ignored Lena's distress, eyes flicking between the pile and the doorway. She shoved the girl aside, uncaring where she fell. Greta seized Mara's shoulders, shaking her hard, and said, "You saw what happened?"
Go, every wasted second is a coin lost. Bring that wealth back, or do not return.
She walked with heavy, deliberate strides, chin lifted. The stream's path felt like a march to a throne. She did not need to be kind. She was clever, and she was bold. That was more than enough. Mara halted at the water's edge. The stream murmured gently, yet the forest stood unnervingly still. She scanned the trees ahead, irritation rising. Why was it taking so long? She had expected quick arrival, swift exchange, and pockets full. Instead, she stood in damp, stagnant air. She crossed her arms, fingers digging into elbows. With a sharp huff, she kicked a pebble into the stream. A sudden shift in the air startled Mara. Mist at the tree line swirled, thickening into a pale veil. From within that haze, a figure emerged. The old woman stepped onto the path, her movements slow and deliberate. Her presence steadied the clearing's erratic energy. Mara did not soften, nor lower her chin. Before the traveler spoke, Mara stepped forward, blocking the water's path. She gestured sharply toward the stream. "I see you," Mara spat, her voice slicing the stillness. "But do not think I am here to serve you." Arms crossed, rigid, she radiated cold defiance. "Fetch your own water. I am no servant, and I won't waste time on your pathetic demands." The forest did not just go quiet. It seemed to hold its breath in anticipation. The air plunged cold, Mara's ragged breaths spilling as white mist. The woman raised a hand, pointing toward the path home. Her voice was low, steady, and devoid of malice, yet it carried the finality of a closing door. "You have chosen your path," the woman said, her words vibrating in the cold air. "You shall receive only what you give." She walked fast, uneven, jaw tight. Every few steps she muttered, rehearsing her story. She would call the woman a senile beggar, a waste of time. The village path wound ahead through fields. She slowed, masking herself in practiced indifference. Mara quickened her stride, her chest swelling with the false confidence of her own narrative. At the threshold, her hand hovered on the frame. She pushed the door hinges groaning and stepped inside. Mara stood at the room's center, chin lifted. Her gaze met Greta, and Greta asked, "What happened?" "Nothing happened," she snapped, sharp and dismissive. "A waste of time." But her rhythm faltered as a dry, clattering sound broke through. A sudden weight pressed her tongue. She choked, eyes wide, as a jagged stone tumbled past her lips and thudded on the floor. Before she could recover, another, The hunger in her eyes vanished, replaced by cold fury. She looked from the stones at Mara's feet to Lena in the corner. Greta lunged forward, her boots crushing a toad underfoot. She pointed a shaking finger directly at Lena, her voice rising to a frantic, accusatory pitch. "You did this! You brought this rot into our home!" The stones and toads forming a barrier between her and the only family she had ever known. She walked to the door, stepping over jagged stones, avoiding the hopping toads with measured strides. Lena opened the door. Morning light spilled in, cutting the stagnant air as she stepped across the threshold. She did not look back. She walked toward the tree line, shadows stretching deep as the house's sounds faded. The forest floor was thick with moss and needles, muffling every step. Lena moved deeper. The chaos behind her gave way to living silence, a weight lifting from her shoulders. Here, the air was cool, smelling of damp earth, pine resin, and ancient growth. She pushed aside a heavy branch, its leaves brushing her skin with a soft rustle. Above, the canopy formed a dense ceiling of green, yet light broke through in vertical shafts, dust motes dancing in the quiet air. She stopped, pressing her hand to the oak's rough bark, feeling the wood's slow pulse. No shouting here, no stones, no accusations, only the drip of a hidden brook and the snap of twigs under birds. She reached a hidden clearing. Sun struck the center in a golden beam. Lena knelt in the light, palms on warm grass, exhaling at last. Boots crunched on dry leaves, breaking the clearing's silence. Lena stood, brushing grass from her palms. A young man stepped from the thicket, cautious but deliberate. 10 paces away, his gaze swept the clearing before fixing on her. "Are you lost?" he asked, voice low and steady with concern. Lena watched, noting his posture. "Not lost," she replied, her voice clear and resonant in the stillness. "Just finding a new path." As her words faded, a rustling began at her feet. Buds pushed through soil, petals of violet and gold unfurling. He stepped closer, eyes widening as blossoms spread, weaving a colorful carpet. He did not recoil or reach for a weapon. He knelt to the flowers, surprise softening into quiet wonder. The air grew heavy with jasmine's fragrance. The prince reached out, his fingers hovering just above a cluster of petals that had sprouted from the moss. He did not touch the pearls or stones scattered like glass. Instead, he looked up, fixing his gaze on Lena. The magic was only a curiosity. Its source held him. He rose slowly, deliberate and unhurried. "The earth responds to you," he said, his voice stripped of any demand or expectation. He stepped forward into the golden light. Lena held his gaze, her posture steady. She did not offer gems or boast of flowers. She waited, calm and unburdened. The prince nodded once, honoring her strength. He saw kindness that had endured cruelty. He extended a hand, palm open not to take, but to offer parity. In that quiet exchange, the forest's tension faded. The shimmering light dimmed, magic's pulse slowing until it matched the wood's rhythm. She saw the jewels and blossoms as echoes of her resolve. For years she bore her home's weight, but here, in the quiet, the burden dissolved. The prince revealed a trail beyond the trees, leading away from the village into the unknown. She walked on without looking back, her focus fixed on the horizon where the trees opened to sky. The prince matched her stride, walking toward a future built on the quiet strength she had carried all along. Back in the village, the small house stood silent, its windows shuttered against the afternoon light. Inside, the floor was buried under a thick layer of jagged, gray stones and the constant, wet thud of toads hopping across the floorboards. Mara sat in the corner, hands pressed to her mouth. Each breath sent a sharp rock tumbling onto the wood. The air hung thick with damp earth and stagnant water. Greta stopped, chest heaving, and looked at her daughter. There was no diamonds, no fortune, only the relentless accumulation of their own bitterness. They were trapped in a space shaped by their choices. Far beyond the village, brooks wound through emerald hills, untouched by the shadows within the weathered house. The seasons turned, the fields shifted from gold to green, and the cycle of the earth remained constant. Kindness, like water feeding the valley, never vanished. It flowed on, finding new ground to nourish. It was never a transaction, but a way of being. When a hand reached to help, when a voice spoke with care, the impact traveled farther than sight. It echoed in the tree's stance, in the light on the water, and in the quiet resolve of those who gave without expectation. Lena's story became part of the landscape itself, a reminder carried by the wind, whispered by brooks to any who listened. Cruelty built walls, but kindness opened doors. Moral of the story: kindness given freely was the only true currency, and it always found its way home.